já montou fábricas de chocolate que deram muito certo. Ele já falou sobre branding de várias companhias da qual ele teve envolvido. E hoje ele vai falar sobre a primeira companhia que deu muito certo, que é a Pete Brewery, que fez uma cerveja chamada Pete Wicked Ale, que foi uma das primeiras American Brown Ales que surgiram no mundo. Essa cerveja demorou para ter sucesso, mas foi uma das primeiras cervejas de grande sucesso do mercado de craft breweries nos Estados Unidos. E antes de começar, a gente vai ver então as propagandas que ele criou para divulgar essa cerveja que era tão desconhecida, e ele foi um dos grandes divulgadores de novos sabores para a cerveja. Na verdade, ele criou maneiras de uma pessoa se tornar um especialista em cerveja em 5 minutos, e isso é uma das coisas que a gente vai ver aqui agora. So it's very nice to introduce you here, and first we are going to watch some videos, and then we're going to listen about what Pete has to talk. So, thank you, Pete. Pode tocar lá.
Morning. How about a picture with the actual Pete, maker of Pete's Wicked Ale?
No.
Hey, there's no line. Would you like a picture with Pete?
No. When's real Pete show up?
A picture with Pete?
No.
No. How you doing? I'm Pete from Pete's Wicked Ale. How would you like my autograph?
No.
It's free today. How you doing, ma'am? I'm Pete. I make Pete's Wicked Ale. You want my autograph? You want a free autograph today?
No.
You want a free autograph?
No.
This is going to be valuable someday. How you guys doing today? I'm Pete from Pete's Wicked Ale. How'd you like my autograph? Hey Bobby, how you doing? I'm Pete. You got a table for 3 tonight?
Yeah.
How you doing, Bob?
Do I know you?
I'm Pete. I make Pete's Wicked Ale.
You're taking up space. Gentlemen, listen. It's guestless, invitation, there's a dress code, please.
But I'm Pete.
Hey, Pete, you're really starting to piss me off.
I make it myself.
There's a line here.
See that beautiful ale? It's my beer.
You can't get in here dressed like that.
Not yet world famous. I love that tagline. Believe me, don't take yourself seriously. Take your beer seriously, but everything else, have some fun with it. So my name is Pete Slosberg. I started Pete's Brewing Company in 1986. We tried to make great beer, and we tried to put some good marketing behind it, and we were quite successful. We were able to go from literally 200 cases our first year to 500,000 hectoliters 10 years later. So it was a good run. We got acquired in 1998. I spent 2 years with the new company, and then I went to Belgium to meet Belgian brewers, and I discovered chocolate, and I had another change of life and went to chocolate school and then started a chocolate company. And we sold that after 7 years. So what I'm going to talk about is my background, how I got into this, and some of the tools and techniques we use to have some fun and grow a company. So my background is I have a degree in space mechanics and propulsion, a rocket scientist. And I love to say it doesn't take a rocket scientist to make beer, but it certainly doesn't hurt. I stayed in school and got a master's in business administration, and during this whole time I never drank any alcohol. I hated alcohol, especially beer. Back in the 1970s, American commercial beer sucked, as does most industrial beer in most countries. But I met my wife when I was in school, and she drove me to drink. And I thank her every day. So what happened? She got me into wine, and the only way I could drink wine was to put a bottle of cheap wine in a freezer. And to me, I could drink it when it's semi-frozen. What I didn't realize then was the cold temperature deadens your tongue so you can't taste anything. So that's what I love when you see on the commercial mass marketed beers, serve ice cold. They're telling you is our beer sucks, and the only way you can drink it is by making it ice cold so you can't taste it. So when I was 29, we moved from the East Coast to California, and I wanted to learn how to make wine. Good-looking guy, got some grapes, a press, and I made some Cabernet Sauvignon. What I didn't realize at the time was once you squeeze it and ferment it, and then you put it into a bottle, you have to wait 3, 4, 5 years. I didn't think that was a good hobby, having to wait that long. So I went back to the store where I got the winemaking equipment and the grapes, and I said, this hobby is great, but I need something quicker. And they said, you can make white wine in 1 year. I said, that's better, but still too long. And then they said, you can make beer in 1 month. And I said, that's fantastic, but I hate beer. And the guy said, have you ever had a homebrew? No, never had it. And he said, I guarantee you'll love homebrew. So I tried it. And you know what? That first batch, which was probably horrible, I'm sure it was just a basic pale ale, tasted so good to me, I couldn't believe that beer could taste this good. And I wondered, why do I like homebrew and hate commercial beer? And it took a couple batches of homebrew to discover that as a child, my favorite candy in the US was something called a malt ball. In Europe, they call them Maltesers. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a crunchy, round candy made with some form of malt or chemicals, dipped in chocolate, usually crappy chocolate, but it tastes good. When I could taste the flavor of the malt ball in the beer, I said, this is eye-opening, this is fantastic. I really went hog wild with homebrewing. I started a homebrew club at the business I worked at, and I was in Silicon Valley. I worked for a telecommunications company. Started a homebrew club there, and 6 years later, ended up starting Pete's Brewing Company with my partner, Mark. Now, what's funny to me, is that I never drank beer till I was 29. I ended up starting a beer company, and my partner, Mark, has never had alcohol to this day. But he thought the beer business would be a cool business, which it is. Anybody here in the business? Anybody here want to get in the business? It's a cool business. But like I said, don't take yourself seriously. Have some fun with it. So before we even started the company, I told Mark, before I leave my regular job, and at that point, the company I was at had been acquired by IBM, the computer company. So I was working for big business. I liked my job, and why the heck would I want to give up a good job to go start a company? So I said, let's talk about the company first before we talk about the product. And if we're in agreement, then we can take the next steps. So what did we talk about? Number one, whatever we did, the goal had to be a world-class product. We're not going to make some commodity. We want to really be proud of our product. Now, it's good to have a goal like that. Of course, it's hard to execute and make it a world-class product, but that was our goal. The second thing was personalize the brand. We have a famous ice cream company in the US called Ben & Jerry's. Has anybody ever heard of it? It's two real guys, made great ice cream, and what we saw was the public in the US generally gets behind real people. Instead of a made-up name, if there's a real person, the public tends to support that better. So we were going to call our company Pete and Mark's, or Mark and Pete's Brewing Company, but in the end, Mark said, I don't drink, Pete, you're the brewer, so let's just call it Pete's. So we did. Mark, to this day, regrets that decision, but that was his decision. Third, you want to make people do a double take. I don't know if that phrase translates or not, but what I mean by double take is there are so many consumer goods out there. When you go into a store, nobody will buy you unless they see you. They'll just, if they don't see you, they'll walk by you on the shelf. So you have to do things to make people stop and look twice. Maybe the label, maybe the name, maybe whatever, but You need to have people stop, do a double take at it, maybe pick up your product, and then they might buy it, but you have to make people stop. Fourth, this was key, humor had to be a core value. Now, we knew nothing about branding. We weren't marketing people at that point. I think we are now, but at that point we weren't. But we said, to really condense it down, we would treat the product with reverence, but everything else with irreverence. And that was our core value, and little did we know that was the core of our brand, meaning have a sense of humor with everything we do. And the last is do things differently. Don't copy everybody. It's amazing how many people will copy a trend rather than go off on their own course. And we're believers in you may not be right, but it's worth it to be different. You have a better chance of differentiating yourself and hopefully being successful. I had never heard this term before, the holy trinity of marketing. Mark's father was in advertising and told Mark this all the time. So the holy trinity of marketing it's three things. It's awareness, trial, and repetition. So if you make a product, like I said before, if nobody sees it, they're never going to buy it. You have to make people aware of it. So once they're aware of it, then you have to have them pick it up and actually buy it and try it. And if they try it, you have to have done your job correctly to have a world-class product so when they try it, they like it and they buy it again. So it's awareness, trial, repetition, awareness, trial, repetition, awareness, over and over again. It's amazing how many new companies, especially new beer companies in the US, a lot of new guys talk to me about starting a business, and I always ask them about the Holy Trinity. If they don't know and they don't think about it, and then when you present them with, okay, so how do you get a consumer to buy it? We have a phrase, it's a deer in a headlight situation where a deer in the headlights of a car, it stops, doesn't know where to go. A lot of the new brewers in the US, they don't know anything about doing things beyond making the beer. So it's important to think about this ahead of time and when you're doing your company. Let me ask this. It's a strange question, but who is your customer? If you have a company, who is your customer? Who here has a company? Okay, you have a company. Who is your customer, sir? And I hate to put you on the spot. Okay, the final customer? Okay, the gentleman says that the final customer or the person who goes in and tries the beer, and my answer is, I don't think so. When you have a company, you have to think ahead that, yes, the final customer who buys your product is important, but you have to sell your concept to many levels of customers, first of which are your employees. How do you get people to even want to work for your company? You have to have a company story, a brand, a product. You have to have stuff to convince an employee to want to work for you. You have to sell your product to a wholesaler. Why would the owner of a wholesaler want to take your product on? You have to have a selling tools to sell the wholesaler principal. And going down the line, you have the wholesaler principal, you have the sales force, the person on the street. That person for the wholesaler might be selling 50 other products. Why would that salesman sell your product? Especially if you're a small company, they don't make much commission. How do you convince a wholesaler sales guy to support you? You have to come up with sales techniques to do that. The retailer sales force, whether it's a bartender or a server in a restaurant or bar, you have to have be able to sell to the press or to media, and ultimately you have to sell to the end user. So I don't mean to have picked on you, but most companies, you don't think about all these other layers that you have to sell to. And you can't leave any of them out. They're important. So this is me in 1986. Funny looking dog, funny name, and a funny looking guy. I like the shorts. How do you like those shorts from 1986? Just one color now. So what did we do to address this branding, marketing challenge? We knew that we were an early craft brewer, but there'd be many more. So we knew we had to have a label that would stand out. We had no money. By the way, granted it's 1986 and the value of the dollar is much different now, but we started our company with only $15,000. That's not a lot of money. We had very little money for artwork, hiring an agency to do our art. We just had a friend that was an artist do the art. But I had a dog. The breed was called English Bull Terrier. I thought English Bull Terriers were the cutest dogs on earth. Mark thought they were the ugliest dogs on earth. But we thought, we got to do something different. Nobody has put the picture of a dog on a label. Let's use the white dog as the core of our label. Now for the name, I mentioned before we wanted to personalize things, so it was going to be Pete's Ale. And my first beer was brown ale, an American brown ale. Matter of fact, the first American brown ale. And it would have been boring just to call it Pete's Ale or Pete's Brown Ale. That's what other brewers were doing at the time. You know, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. Other brewers are just taking this, I call it a lazy approach and not being very creative in the naming. The beers were good. So we knew we had to have a hook for people to look at the bottle on the shelf and maybe pick it up. In English, wicked means something bad. But in American slang, it means the best. So we heard a comedian on a radio station in San Francisco do some jokes, and he kept saying, wicked this, wicked that. And when we heard it, we thought, that's a brilliant, brilliant word to use in the naming of our beer. So by having the dog and having the name Wicked, it really set us on our path. We had a white dog on a purple label on a brown bottle. You could see this bottle from 5 to 10 meters away. And is it a great label? Of course not. But did it serve its purpose of getting your eye to go to it? Absolute winner. So you can argue that you don't need a lot of money to have a creative label. The end result is having somebody see it. And if somebody sees it and grabs it, that's the win. This was our first display. Can you imagine how excited we were to have a 5-case display in a store? But what I want you to just take a look. Look at the labels behind me, and look at the white and purple. It does stand out. Nowadays, there's a lot of color and a lot of crazy labels, but when you're pioneering, this was really different. An example of pioneering that I see in Brazil are the guys at Doom in Curitiba. The name petroleum says it all of what to expect and what the beer looks like, and having a simple white oil derrick on a black bottle, it's the opposite of complex. It's so simple, but it gets the message across. But that's the thing you have to do when you come out with a product, is have something that will become visible. We have material in the US that you can put in stores. It's called point of sale material. And some stores will let you put it up, and a lot of companies go out of their way to go to marketing agencies and spend a lot of money having these little, they're called shelf talkers, little bits of information you can put on the shelf. And we said, screw that, we don't have any money for that. Screw that, is that a... We said, we don't have the money to spend with an agency, but rather than looking professional, let's be different. Let's make it look like a kid with crayons made our marketing materials. And we were kids, and we did have crayons, but we made these little signs for the shelf to make it look like it was handcrafted. It was, and we just put it on a color copier and made copies of this. Was this fantastic marketing? Well, in a way it was, because it got people's attention. Normally when you go to a store, you see professionally produced stuff. When you see this hand-produced stuff, your eye goes to it and you want to read it. So right out of the gate, we were at the Great American Beer Festival. We were voted the #1 ale in the country. That was pretty cool. No? Come on, that was real cool. So we wanted to get the word out that we achieved our first goal, at least we started to achieve it, of having a world-class beer by winning awards. So we have something in the US. Have you ever heard of something called, thank you, it is funny. Have you ever heard of a term called a sell sheet? A sell sheet, anybody? No. A sell sheet is a vehicle for a manufacturing company to get information out to distributors and retailers and sometimes consumers that if you have a new product or some type of promotion, just condense the whole story onto one sheet of paper, maybe 2 sides. And it's something you can leave behind for the wholesaler sales force or the retailers to try to remember you. So Pete's Wicked Ale was our first beer. Then we came out with Pete's Wicked Lager. And like any other beer company or any other consumer company, we could have said, we have a brand new product. But that's boring. Nobody pays attention to saying you have a new product. So we had this crazy idea of having a picture in a delivery room, having a new product born with a doctor, you know, congratulations, it's a lager, and the theme, Born Wicked. This point of sale was so successful with our wholesalers and retailers that they loved it. A lot of companies will have beer shirts, beer t-shirts, and when we launched this product, we said, you know, basically screw that, we don't need another t-shirt. So we had, it's hard to see in this picture, but we had a doctor's smock, a green doctor's smock, and Born Wicked. And we couldn't make enough of these. These just sold like hotcakes. Again, try to be different. Then the back of our sell sheet, you can see what the t-shirt had Born Wicked on the front and the label on the back. And the people went wild for this. And we didn't have to spend a lot of money to get a lot of attention. So this is an American quarter, and on the American quarter there is a picture of George Washington, the first president. But to have some fun with this, in business, a lot of business measurements are every 3 months or a quarter of a year. So this is a play, it's a pun, it's a joke on a quarter of a year and 25 cents, a quarter of a dollar. But you know, putting my good-looking face on it and Pete's We Trust, is it great? You know, you get the point. Don't take yourself seriously. You know, be the butt of jokes. It's fun to have fun. So we had gotten to the point where we had done 1 million cases of beer. For us, to get to that point, it's like, holy cow, this is something we should tell the world about. We got 1 million cases of beer. And we were going to send out a press release to newspapers. And the reality is 1 million cases of beer in the world of beer is a drop in the bucket. For Brahma, for Budweiser, they do 1 million cases in a second. So we knew if we wanted to get any press out of reaching 1 million cases, we just couldn't send out words, just a press release. So a young lady in our office who was doing our some of our public relations stuff said, you know, Pete, we got to have a picture to go with the press release. I said, fine. And she said, you know, the image I have in my head is Pete, you were a home brewer, and the image she had was home brewing is done in a bathtub, which isn't correct, but that's what the image is of non-beer people. So she said, would I get in the bathtub covered in beer so this picture could accompany the press release? And I said, great idea. And by putting this picture in with the press release, we got into 300 newspapers around the US. So be different, do things crazy, don't take yourself seriously. Those bottles of beer were full. It was painful being in the tub for a while. Okay, I want to spend a couple minutes on this. So you're in the beer business, its early phases. Does that sound familiar here in Brazil? Do people know what craft beer is? I don't see your heads going up or down. But I bet that most Brazilians don't have a clue what craft beer is. So let's say you have a beer company and you get your beer into a bar or a restaurant, and a customer goes in and says, what kind of beer do you have? In the US in the 80s and early 90s, the answer was Bud, Miller, and Coors. And because my name was on the company, my job was to be out of the office, going around the country. The other guy was doing the stuff in the office. So when I went out around the country, I would go to the wholesalers, and the wholesalers would say, go to restaurant A for lunch and restaurant B for dinner. And when I would go in, the first thing a server would ask you when you sit down is, would you like something to drink, right? Right. So I'm there because they have Pete's Wicked Ale. And I'm thinking, holy crap, I can't wait for the server to say they have Pete's Wicked Ale. I can't wait to hear it. So when the server says, would you like something to drink? I would say, yeah, I'm in the mood for a beer. What do you got? And all around the country, north, south, east, west, it didn't matter. The servers would say, we have Bud, Bud Light, Miller, Miller Light, and Coors, Coors Light. And I'm thinking, what the heck? I'm here because they're supposed to have Pete's Wicked Ale. So I like having fun with people. So I would say, don't you have anything with color, taste, or aroma? And you'd get a chuckle from the server. And then the server would say, hesitatingly, we have Pete's Wicked Ale, Sam Adams Boston Lager, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. So then I would say, if you had those, why didn't you mention them? And this was one of the biggest learnings in my life. Having an engineering degree and an MBA, they don't teach this in school. But the reality is, in the US, servers get approximately a 15% tip. If they do a better job, it might go up to 20%. If they do a worse job, it might go down. So the answers I got from servers all around the country was, look, I depend on my tips. If you ask me for what Pete's Wicked Ale tasted like, nobody's trained me to describe your beer or any other craft beer. So if I can't answer the question, I look stupid and I might risk getting the tip. If I don't mention your beer, I'm not risking anything. So that's why I'm not mentioning it. So here I'm thinking, holy mackerel, we spend all this time and money to get the company up and running, to create a product, to get it packaged, to get it to the wholesaler, to get it to the retailer, and the ultimate salesperson doesn't even say that they have it. There's a problem. So this is approximately 1991. I talked to a lot of owners of bars and restaurants, and I said, what if we put on beer education for your staff? Would you support that? And just about every owner would say, yes, we support it, but we're only going to give you 10 minutes because we're paying for the server or bartender's time. We're only going to pay for 10 minutes of training. So the challenge was, how do you make educational material so simple you can make anybody a beer expert in under 10 minutes? And the answer is, with this. I'm going to take you through this. So I'm going to do it quickly. I'm going to see if I can do it in under 10 minutes. Since you guys are all into beer, you should know all this. But this was highly effective, and this really helped change the landscape for not just our beer, but all craft beer. So in the world of beer, there are three main terms. Everybody's heard them, but not many people can explain them. And the three terms are beer, ale, and lager. Would anybody like to tell me, either in English or Portuguese, in simple terms, what's the difference between a beer, ale, or lager? A volunteer? Okay, no volunteers. So I'll give you my version. And my version's really simplified, but you got to keep things simple for people to remember it. So beer is a generic term for a fermented beverage made from grain. Okay? Wine is a fermented beverage Made from grapes. Wrong. From any fruit. Doesn't have to be grapes. And the third alcoholic grouping is mead, and mead is from honey. So beer is a generic term for a beverage from grain, okay? Ales versus lagers, two substyles of beer, lots of technical reasons why they're different. Consumers could care less about technical answers. There are a lot of misconceptions. In America, people think ales have to be dark and bitter, lagers have to be light and smooth. Not like that. People will use terms top fermented and bottom fermented, and that just, people's eyes glaze over when they hear that explanation because it doesn't mean anything. So my simplified definition is ales are fermented at a higher temperature. The higher temperature creates esters which have a fruity aroma. Therefore, ales generally have a fruity aroma. Lagers are fermented cold. They don't develop those esters, so lagers don't have a fruity aroma. Okay? Fruity aroma, not fruity aroma. Is that 100% of the time? Of course not, but it's easy to remember and it's generally true. There's a color bar. Ales and lagers can be any color, golden to amber to brown to black, right? So then you try to explain what malting is. You know what malting is? Everybody know what malting is? So malting is sprouting and then drying, then the amount of heat and time that you dry the grain can darken the grain. So what I tried to do is use one-word explanations for what to expect. If you have a golden beer made from barley, and I sample people on the grain, if you taste, pale malt, I say, does it taste like bread or crackers? And the answer is, yeah. So if you see a golden beer made from barley, your mind should tell you it should taste like bread or crackers. A reddish beer, amber beer. We have a cereal in the U.S. I'm blanking on the name. Why am I blanking? Anyway, we have a cereal in the U.S. that tastes nutty, grape nuts. And grape nuts are made from amber malt, so it has a nutty taste. A brown beer should taste roasted, and a black beer should taste burnt. So one-word phrases to give you the image in your mind of what it's going to taste like before you even taste it. So just repeating, golden is bread-like, amber is nutty, brown is roasted, and black is burnt, okay? You with me? We have a vertical scale. Since I'm an engineer, I have to have XY coordinates. We have one scale for sweetness going up, another scale for bitterness going down. And the sweetness is how the brewer manipulates the grain, and the bitter scale is for how they manipulate the use of hops. Okay? Does anybody know why hops are the spice in beer? Why the prominent spice in beer? Okay. It's bitter, people like bitter. It's aromatic, people like aromatic. And third, and very important, it's the only herb or spice that has a natural preservative in it, so beers made with hops last longer. And that's useful information for servers. It shows that they know something if they want to tell the customer something. Okay, so now we have the outside of the chart. We have beer, ale, lager, the color scale, a sweetness scale, and a golden scale. It's hard to see from where you are, but see these rectangles? There's a key down here. At the time, I just put on the 15 most popular styles. And I used the BJCP guidelines, but simplified them to rectangles. Otherwise, they look like bacteria, amoeba. They're all squiggly. And there's a box, turns out it's box 13. It's for Bock beers. Bock beers are up here. So in the U.S., we have a lot of breweries coming out with Bock beers in the springtime. You know, it's a spring seasonal to celebrate the end of winter. So if you go into a pub and you see a sign for Bock beer and you ask the server, what's a Bock beer taste like? Without any training, the server can say with this chart, is it an ale or a lager? Is it an ale or a lager, Bock beer? It's a lager. Do lagers have a fruity aroma? No. What's the basic color of a lager? It's amber. And is it fairly sweet? It's up on the scale, so fairly sweet. So the server, without any real training, can say, oh, Bock beer, you want to know what a Bock beer is? You never heard of it? Well, a Bock beer is a lager. There's no fruity aroma. It's amber in color, nutty in flavor, and fairly sweet. Would you like to try it? Is that useful information? So I put the 15 styles up, the most common styles, so servers can describe it in these one-word phrases. And ultimately, Pete's Wicked Ale is right here. And ultimately, the secret is, how do you get somebody to know what Pete's Wicked Ale is? And the answer is, you don't have to describe every beer. If you know one beer on the chart, one beer, you can describe all the other beers in terms of the one that you know. So we have another beer from California, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, right here. So if a customer goes in and says, oh, you have Pete's Wicked Ale, what does it taste like? The server can say, do you know Sierra Nevada Pale Ale? And the customer says, yeah, I know it. So the server can say, Pete's Wicked Ale is to the left, so it's darker in color, it's more roasted in flavor, and less bitter. Would you like to try it? Is that useful? So all the commercial beers around the world are right in the middle. You know, golden with no sweetness, no bitterness, they're all right there. Then you have these, you go out and out with more intensity of color and flavor. So one of the things I always encourage servers to do is find out from your customer what they're used to, what they like. Down here is an IPA, the IPA box. If a Brahma drinker comes into your pub and asks the server, what do you like? What do you recommend? And the server says, I'm a hophead, I like IPAs. Can you imagine if the Brahma drinker goes all the way down there on the first beer? Will they ever try another craft beer? They'll never try another one. So the thing is, know what your customer likes and then recommend, I call them baby steps around where you are. Okay? So I don't think I took more than 10 minutes. Are you beer experts now? What do you think? Is that cool or not? So I'll give you another example. I got asked to give this talk at a corporate restaurant chain at their national meeting. All the store managers were in the meeting. And the restaurant had 20 tap handles in every store. We weren't one of them. So they asked me to give this talk. I was hoping to do the talk and then ask if I can get one of the tap handles. So I gave the talk. The chairman of the board said, this was great. Thank you so much for coming. And I said, well, I'm glad you liked it. Now, can we have a tap handle? And the chairman said, well, we have 20 handles. We're corporate. It takes forever to make changes, but we'll consider you. And I knew that was going to be his answer. So I changed the chart from these common craft beers from all around the country to putting the 20 beers they had on at their restaurant on the chart so he could see what they had. Out of the 20 beers, 19 were right here, and then they had Guinness here. As soon as the chairman could see what they were offering, they weren't offering customers choice. Yes, choice in names of beer, but not choice in flavors of beer. As soon as he saw that what they were doing was totally screwed up, he said, you're in. So this was good not only for education, but as a selling tool. Okay? So I gave this presentation years ago at the American Home Brewers Association. And some home brewers in the front row said, this is such a great chart, you got to do a t-shirt. So we did. Now, you in the back can't see it, but for you guys up close, is there anything weird about this t-shirt? It's upside down. And I said, no, it's not. It's not upside down. This is the way it should be. Okay, why did we do this crazy thing? The answer is, you notice it if it's upside down. If it's right side up, you'll never notice it. And then our second response is, no, it's not upside down. If I'm in a bar and I have a question, all I have to do is look down and read it. Like I said, you got to do things different. You got to be creative. not everything works, but if you do things that are different and people notice, they appreciate it. So cans are really popular now in the US. We put our beer in cans in 1995. We thought it would be cool and get the word out about our product if we could get it in cans and get it on airlines. So we got it in 4 airlines in 1995, and the airlines loved having a craft beer. Okay, that's a quick overview for beer. Like I said, we grew fairly quickly. We had 10 years straight of over 100% growth rate. That's pretty good. We went public in 1995 and we got acquired in 1998. Over those years, I became friends with a Belgian brewer. His name is Pierre Celis. Pierre Celis was the man who invented Hoegaarden White. It was a style of beer that died out in Belgium. He brought it back. And he sold his company to Miller Brewing, and he was spending a lot of time in Belgium, and we were friends, and he kept saying, come over to Belgium, come over to Belgium. But I was so busy traveling for the beer company, I couldn't. So after we sold the company in 98, I had to spend 2 years with the acquiring company. So in the year 2000, I was free, and I went to Belgium, and Pierre took me all around Belgium. And whether you're in a big city or a small village, Belgium has great beers. It's just an amazing place. But every place has a chocolatier, a chocolate shop. And I couldn't believe how great Belgian chocolates were compared to the crap we have in the US. And it made me wonder, why is the chocolate in Europe better than the chocolate in the US? So I went online and started reading about it. And I found out there was a reason. There was a key reason. And the reason was, with regulations in Europe, to call something dark chocolate, it has to be 35% cacao minimum, 35%. In the US, there's a minimum, it's only 15%. So guess what the big guys do? They make it to the lowest number they can. Now, sure, the quality of the beans, cocoa beans, are going to matter, but the fact that Europe had a much higher minimum says they put more of the good stuff in. And with milk chocolate, there's a difference too. In the US, the minimum is 10%, and in Europe, the minimum is 25%, so even their milk chocolate is better. And I thought to myself, damn, those damn Americans, the big companies, they put in extra sugar to dilute the flavor of the chocolate. It's cheaper, and it's a lower flavor profile. And I thought, you know, that reminds me of something. Why the hell did I get into beer? When I was not drinking in the 1970s, it was because the big guys would put rice and corn to dilute the flavor of the barley. It would be cheaper, but also dilute the flavor of the barley, and I didn't like that. So the more I looked into the world of craft chocolate versus industrial chocolate, it reminded me of craft beer versus industrial beer. So in 2001, I went to chocolate school and started a chocolate company. And the approach I wanted to do with chocolate was not be serious about it. We weren't serious with our beer, let's not be serious with our chocolate. In the world of premium chocolate, it's everything serious. The colors are gold or platinum or silver, and it's all hoity-toity, it's all really upscale, and we wanted to make great chocolate for common people. Make chocolate that make high quality chocolate you want to consume yourself, not just buy it for your aunt or grandmother on her birthday. So I wanted to do something else unique. Most chocolate bars are flat rectangles. The little research I did said that people think a molded piece of chocolate, a molded individual piece, is higher quality than a flat bar. It's not, but that's the perception of almost 100% of the people, that molded pieces are higher quality. But most people buy molded pieces as gifting, where rectangular bars you eat for yourself. So I combined the two. I wanted to have molded pieces in a bar that you can consume for yourself. And we put on bright colors, not the standard chocolate colors on our package. And we use puns for names, like the bottom one. We put these wonderful dried organic strawberries in our dark chocolate, and we called it Berry, Berry Dangerous. It cracks a smile. I'm a beer guy, so I made malt crunchies with, you know, in homebrew stores, something called DME, dry malt extract. So I happen to like amber DME, so I made malt crunchies of DME and put it in our milk chocolate, and we call that Maltimus Maximus. So trying to apply the lessons we learned with beer to chocolate, you can see our approach. So 4 flavors, 4 bars. Okay. You got to be different, you got to be crazy. So what happens if you're trying to give out samples of your product in a store? Typically what I see in the US is there'll be somebody standing there with a tray with samples. People come by, grab, eat, and go, right? Who wants to talk to this person? You just want to get something and keep going. That's not what I wanted to do for our company. So I needed a way to make people do a double take. How do you get people to stop and actually talk to you about your product and learn about it? So I created something called a monometer. A monometer. What is it? Well, when people would try our chocolate, especially women, but even men, what would happen was they take the chocolate, the head goes back, the eyes close, and there's a mmm. So I wanted to have fun with that. I went to a local electronics store, Radio Shack. I got a digital sound level meter, and I put it in this purple monometer housing. And I would put that next to the plate full of chocolate. And when people went to get a piece of chocolate, they had to do a double take. They said, what is that device? And I would say, our chocolate is so good, it's going to make you moan. And not only will it make you moan, I can tell you the decibels of your moan. And that people smile, and then they say, let me try it. And this was so great, because what would happen, people would put the chocolate in, and they go, mmm. Then they see the digital readout, and it was 60 decibels. And they go, only 60 decibels? Mmm. 80 decibels. Mmm. 100 decibels. And of course, people all around the store would come over and wonder what's going on. So, is it a stupid device? Yes. Did it work? Absolutely. The education chart I did for the beer world was very effective. Turns out in craft chocolate, there are a lot of differences in products, and nobody knows where chocolate comes from. So I created the same type of education chart for how chocolate is made on the left, and then for the world of white, milk, and dark chocolates with scales to show how commercial products related to one another. And this was highly effective, especially with wholesalers and retailers who sold high-end chocolates. They had no clue what made chocolates different from one another. And that's a brief background of the wicked adventures of beer and chocolate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions?
Pete, your stories are amazing. Thanks a lot for sharing with us. I guess we're not having Pete's Wicked Ale anytime soon, so I wonder if you can open source the recipe for us here in this room right now.
I'll give it to you right now.
Great.
It is 70% pale, 29% 60 Lovibond caramel, and 1% chocolate. And the hopping was Cascade.
Okay, it's been recorded, right? Okay. Thanks.
Pete, I found fascinating this training you did for waiters to be able to tell customers. Obviously, you couldn't do that all yourself. You probably had others that helped do it. What I was wondering is, did you ever do any market research after you started that to see how many waiters not only started doing it, but continued doing it over time so that it became a new phenomenon in restaurants in the U.S.?
Didn't do any serious research, but you could tell especially with accounts that wouldn't put up any point-of-sale material from any beer company, would put that chart up because it was good for everybody. But one anecdote, has anybody here heard of Dogfish Head, Sam Calgione? So I was doing a beer and chocolate class at a festival in Montreal in 2003, I think. And Sam was there, and I'd never met him. So I went up and I said, Sam, I love what you're doing. And he says, Pete, we've already met. And I'm going, holy crap. I know I'm getting old, but I don't remember meeting you. Where did we meet? And it turns out before Sam got into beer, he was at the journalism program at Columbia University in New York City and working part-time as a server at a beer bar across the street. And he was in attendance on one of these seminars. So at least one person listened.
Okay. So thank you, Pete, so much. Some applause for Pete.